My name is Phil Lindsey, and I'm a lifelong resident of Independence, Missouri. In 2006, I saw something which greatly disturbed me, and that was the passage in the last few days of the Missouri legislature of Senate Bill 1014, the photo voter ID law, which mandated that as of November of 2006, in order to vote, you had to be carrying certain IDs which were mandated under this law. And most people think this is no big deal, and for a lot of people it isn't. But for a lot of city dwellers, a lot of older people, nuns, as we saw last fall in Indiana, for a lot of people it is a problem. And so I looked at the figures, had the availability of them, and at that time it appeared that roughly 180 or 200,000 people that were Missouri voters and had voted for a long period of time would not be able to produce this photo voter ID in time for the elections in November of 2006. Thank goodness, Judge Callahan of Cole County ruled, and I believe it was the 18th or 20th of October of 2006, that indeed that the law was unconstitutional and did not go into effect in 2006. But I brought in my card in February and I said, here. He said, I need to see a driver's license or a photo ID, a photo voter ID. And I said, I beg your pardon, but I don't think so. If you didn't hear, it was 2006 in October that law was declared unconstitutional. I'm assuming that you weren't aware of that or brought up to date on it. And he said, well, just a second. He turned around to another gentleman, apparently the supervisor, and he said, this gentleman is attempting to use the notification as an identification form. And this gentleman walked up, the supervisor, and said, you're going to need to show me a driver's license or a photo ID or you're not going to vote. And I said, beg your pardon, aren't you aware that this was declared unconstitutional? I know that maybe that was a law for 6 months or so, but it's not now. And he said, if you don't show it to me, then you're not going to vote. And I kind of, put my tongue in my cheek for a minute and thought about, okay, what is the situation here? And I'm thinking, okay, maybe they just haven't made it clear enough to them. This is a presidential primary. There's not an awful lot at stake here. So I told him, I'm going to go ahead and give you my driver's license today. But when I come back to vote in August, hopefully you will be trained and know what to accept. It's always on the Secretary of State side, and the election board is supposed to make sure that everyone's trained on this beforehand. So just understand that, that if I come back in August and you ask me for the same thing, then we would have a problem on our hands. So as soon as we walked in, a lady sitting at the first table said, would you like to vote? And I said, yes, we would. She said, may I see your ID, please? And she took the card that had been mailed to me from the Eastern Jackson County Board notifying me of the election. She said, this doesn't have a signature on it. I need to see something with a signature. And I said, I don't think that you do. And we had taken precautions to print off the web page from the Secretary of State site, which showed what the requirements were. He asked me, he said, would you like to vote? And I said, I would. He said, I need to see your ID then. And I handed him again the same card that I handed the lady. He said, I need to see something with a signature on it. And I said, well, I don't think so. And I did look around, and there were no signs, there were no sheets on the table, there was nothing on the wall, and I don't recall whether in the past that there has been. After the fact, I did find out that the Secretary of State had sent to the local board laminated sheets of paper showing, again, the photo voter ID alternatives. But there appeared to be nothing there. And so it was just him saying, I need to have a signature ID. I'm really sorry to make an issue of this, but I have 4 forms of ID here, which should be suitable. This is what's put on the Secretary of State's site. If you'd like, I've got a printout of it. If you would like to look at it, I offered it to him. He did not take it. But I said, the Secretary of State determines what is required. This is what is required, and I have 4 forms here. Choose whichever one you like. The gentleman, and this is when it began to get very strange, and I realized that this was not just, as they say in the movie Cool Hand Luke, this was not a failure to communicate. I said, if you would, you can either look at this or you can call the Secretary of State, or if you would, please call Charlene Davis at the election board, because I spoke to her a couple weeks ago to clarify this, because I was asked for photo voter ID in February. And the guy raised up out of his chair and he said, you give me the photo voter ID now, or you get the hell out of here and don't ever come back. And I was shocked. He was a big guy, but the vehemence with which he said, what's going on? And so your first reaction is not fright, it's not anger, it's, you're stunned. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be willing to give you what you just asked me for, but I am willing to have you call either of those 2 entities and we'll get this worked out. Either that or provide me the reason that you're denying me the right to vote, because that would be what I would need to know to file a complaint someplace. And at about that moment, a guy who was roughly 90 degrees to my left hurriedly walked up to me and was yelling as he walked up. And he walked up and chest bumped me. This guy, said, you give him what he wants or you get the hell out of here right now. And I'm thinking, what? And I didn't move a muscle. And I think now as I look back on it, that was not just him ordering me out and giving me orders. It was an attempt to it was obviously an attempt to intimidate, but I think that it was also an attempt to cause me to react to him so that he would have a reason to do exactly what he did within the next 5 minutes, which was to call the police. He called 911 and he said, I need some policemen out here and I need them now.